Hey, my friend.
What's up?
Just chilling. Oh shit, my computer went to sleep.
So Anderson asked me why my underarms flap. So
I love children.
That made me feel so good. So good.
I'm sorry.
Now I'm like, ah.
Oh my God, stop it.
Kids say the darndest things. Well, hey everybody, welcome to another week of Case Files with Kat
And Ashley.
Yeah.
You see, it's stories like that just make me just want to run out and have children. Anyways, what are you drinking?
Oh, an old standby.
Sorry, I just jumped straight to the drinks. I'm excited about mine.
Oh, okay. I'm drinking a St. Arnold art car. I don't know why I had to look at it. I can tell by the color. It's a St. Arnold art car. Old Houston.
Did you see they're
true.
closing the art car museum?
No.
Did you know they had an art car museum?
Well,
You looked at me
like,
they're closing
on the
museum.
brewery site. So
No, the actual museum. They had an off-site
an
museum.
off-site. Okay.
Mm-hmm. And you used to be able to go and walk through and see all of these cars, but yeah, they're closing it.
Well, they have on the brewery site. They have the little covering.
Yeah.
The porte-cochere.
Yeah. What a great segue into my beer.
Yes. Let's talk about cars. Wow.
It's Blake's Hard Cider, which is the same cider that I had last week, but this one is called Triple Jam, and it's strawberry, blackberry, and raspberry, and it's so freaking delicious. But the can art is so cute. I'm gonna have to post it. It's the berries shaped like cars, they're in a jam, a traffic jam, but berries jam. I love it. I'm a sucker for a good pun. Play on words, whatever you want to call it. But anyways, it's not too sweet. It's really, really good. It's really refreshing. I absolutely love this one. I don't know where you're finding these at, but they're amazing. It's a good job. Gluten free, made with real fruit.
Wow.
It's been a week, okay?
It's been a week.
It's only Tuesday at 6:55.
All right. Let's hop into it.
You just want to hop into it?
Yeah,
okay, I'm sure you guys
I've got nothing, so I've got nothing.
Neither do I, so I guess we can just go home.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm sure everyone thought I was going to do a disappearance.
You said.
I know, but then I was researching stuff, and I came across this one, and I really wanted to do it. And I'll give a trigger warning because this story does involve crimes against children. Unfortunately, there is some essay that's discussed, but it's not I'm not going to go into gruesome details other than a very brief of what
you said that so fast. So you're going to talk about sexual assault,
yes.
But
it's not going to be I'm not going to go into super detailed stuff about it. It's just I have to say what happened to them, but outside of that, we're not going to talk about it.
Okay.
So while I researched this, there were so many good sources on this case. Now, Crime Junkies did a podcast on this, but they did it in 2018, and since that time, there's been updates to the case.
Oh, okay.
But a large portion of the information did come from them, and then from another news article that it's all in the resources. So I highly suggest if this story interests you and you want to know all of the details, because I had to leave a lot of it out, to go look at the resource notes and look at some of those articles, or there's a documentary that I'll talk about at the end that's really good too that you can watch on YouTube.
Awesome.
Okay, I'm just going to get into it.
Yeah.
So Camp Scott was a well-known Girl Scout camp that spanned 400 acres located near Locust Grove, Oklahoma.
Oh my God. Girl Scouts. This is about Girl Scouts.
On August 12th, 1977, there were more than 100 Girl Scouts that arrived at Camp Scott's headquarters for what was supposed to be 2 weeks of fun. But this is Case Files, so here we are.
We know what happened.
So once the girls arrived at the campsite, so they would arrive at the headquarters and then be bused to the actual campsite. So their parents would drop them off, they would say their goodbyes, they'd get on a bus and go to the campsite. So once they arrived at the campsite, they would be divided into 3s and 4s per they were tents, but some stories call them cabins and some call them tents. So it's a little confusing, but it was actual tents. So there would be a counselor's tent in the middle, and then
but they were tents. They weren't tents. Cabins. Okay.
And then there were the girls where the Girl Scouts were sleeping. Those tents would be around
Okay.
The counselor. Okay.
Okay.
So if you research this story, just let me say this because they made it super confusing. Technically, there's technically 8 tents. Okay. But only 7 of them have Girl Scouts.
Got it.
The first one is the counselor. So some stories will say tent
8 tents.
7.
Okay. Oh,
but
okay.
it's really tent 6, depending on.
Shit.
Yeah.
Okay.
For this purpose of this story, I'm referring to only the Girl Scout tent. So 1 through 7. So 7 would be the last tent. 1, you get what I'm saying? Okay. I just wanted to clear that up because if you go and look at other stories, it would be confusing. Okay, so anyways, once the girls arrive at the campsite, they would be divided into 3 or 4s per cabin or tent. That evening around 7 p.m., there were 3 Girl Scouts, and they had gone back into their tent because there was a thunderstorm, and the counselors were trying to get everyone to go back inside. The tents were where the girls stayed, and again, they were kind of fanned out in order for the counselors to keep an eye on the girls. However, tent 7, which was the furthest away, and it was almost impossible for them to see it at night because like the bathroom area kind of blocked it from the counselor's view. It was a weird little setup.
Oh, so it wasn't in a circle.
It was like I don't know how to describe it. It was like a half circle, but theirs went around and the bathroom was there and kind of in the middle of like the circle. You know what I mean? Like the tents were around, and there's a map of it that I'll post, but it went around, and then in the middle was the bathroom facilities that everyone would use, and that kind of blocked off the view of that very last tent. It was the furthest one away from the counselor's tent. I know. So anyways, so there were 3 girls staying in this tent. Lori Farmer, who was 8, Michele Guse, which was 9, and Denise Milner, which was 10. So I'm going to talk about these 3 girls for a moment just to give a little bit. There's not much information that I found about Michele, but as far as Lori and Denise go. Okay, so Lori's 9th birthday was only a week away. She was very adventurous. She wanted to do what all the other girls were doing, and she had begged her mom to send her to the camp. She didn't care what camp. She just wanted to go to a summer sleepaway camp because that's what the big girls did. They went away for the summer. And so at first her mom was very reluctant because she was so young. But she eventually gave in, and there were 2 camps that her mom was trying to choose between, the Girl Scout ones and then a camp that was held by the Y. Lori, again, had no preference, and her mom would later say she is the one that decided to send Lori to Camp Scott, and it was a decision that she would regret for the rest of her life. Denise, however, was a homebody. She wanted to stay home. She was so close to her mom. She was very much one of those kids that if she went to a sleepover, she was calling her mom like 10 minutes later. Like she did not like staying the night anywhere. However, in the spring of 1977, Denise shocked her mom by begging to go away to this sleepaway camp, claiming all of her friends were going there. And Denise and her mom went back and forth about this because Denise was the type of girl who, again, would go to these sleepovers and...
Yeah, I'm looking at the picture. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Oh, of the tents?
Of the tent.
Yeah.
Like,
it was supposed to be a circle, but it's really not.
There's a building directly in the way.
Yeah.
Like, that is ridiculous.
But the parents were told that the tents were going to be in a circle where the counselors could see everybody anytime.
No, it's basically just a line.
Right.
Like kind of a half circle, I guess, but it's kind of just like a.
There was a lot of stuff not told
bump.
to parents that we're going to talk about.
Like, holy shit. When you guys see this picture, you're going to be like, what the?
Yeah. Okay, so Denise again started begging her mom. Her mom was really shocked. She originally told her, no, absolutely not, because you're going to go to this camp and then you're going to want to come home. But Denise promised her that she really wanted to go to this Girl Scout camp. So Denise's mom finally caved after waiting a while because she was like, well, we'll see how it goes. And then summer rolled around and Denise was still asking. So she's like, she must really want to do this. So this, of course, was until the day before camp was supposed to start. Denise wanted to completely back out. She started begging her mom to back out, saying she wouldn't know anyone, that she was scared, she didn't want to go. But her mother was kind of fed up with it because she knew that that was going to happen. She told her that was going to happen. And so she put her foot down and she made a deal with Denise at the time of drop off, saying, look, I paid for you to be here. You wanted to be here. We're already here. Spend one night. And if after one night you want me to come pick you up, I will. And so she agreed. And so she got out of the car and went. And then again, like I said, I couldn't find a lot about Michele. So, sometime in the darkness of June 12th, which was drop-off night, so the very first night that the camp was in place.
And how many girls were there total at this point?
A little over 100 total.
Wow. Okay.
There was 3, though, that were in cabin 7. That was Lori, Michele, and Denise. And during the night, an intruder entered in the back of their tent, killing and sexually assaulting all 3 girls. Around 6 a.m. the following morning, a counselor named Carla woke up and noticed a sleeping bag near the front of the camp and assumed the buses had dropped off more supplies, but as she walked closer, she knew something wasn't right. She discovered the lifeless bodies of Farmer, Guse, and Milner stuffed into their sleeping bags near the main road into camp. Like I said, all 3 girls had been sexually assaulted and beaten. Farmer and Guse were found to be bludgeoned to death, and Milner had been strangled. Their bodies were approximately 150 yards from their tent. When police arrived on the scene, they found tent number 7 covered in blood. They also learned about strange noises that several other campers and counselors had heard throughout the night. At around 1:30 a.m., multiple people heard weird moaning sounds coming from the direction of tent 7. Carla would eventually...
Nobody went to check.
Well, I'll get into that in a second. I'm just kind of giving like a little bit of background.
Okay.
So Carla, who would eventually discover the bodies, did investigate the noise, but she couldn't find the source. So thinking it was most likely an animal, she went back to sleep.
Oh my God.
So approximately 30 minutes later, a camper in tent 5 was awoken when someone with a flashlight was in front of their tent, but she assumed it was a counselor, doing like a routine check on everybody. She said no one ever entered their tent. And then at around 3 a.m., another girl heard a scream come from the section of camp where tent 7 was located. At the same time, another camper heard a scream followed by someone screaming, "Mama, Mama."
Oh my God.
Unsure of what to do, both of the girls just went back to sleep.
Oh my God.
The 3 girls in tent number 7 had known each other for less than 24 hours. They had just met each other. Lori was the youngest girl at the camp. She was just 8 years old. Michele had previously attended Camp Scott and knew it very well. Like, she loved this camp. This was not the first time she had been there. And then Denise had wanted to back out at the trip after 2 of her friends that were supposed to be going canceled. But again, her mother had encouraged her to go anyways. And there was actually a 4th girl who was supposed to stay in the tent with them, but wasn't scheduled to arrive until the following day. So during the day, the 3 girls had all participated in camp activities. They had written letters home to their families, which were later found in the tent. Lori reportedly wrote about Denise and Michele in her letter, saying they were her new friends. But Denise had written a letter to her mother that she said that she was right, as in Denise was right, and she wanted to come home, that she didn't want to be there for the 2 weeks. And there was actually a 4th girl that had been put in their tent that wasn't originally supposed to be there. Her name was Angela. Her troops' tents were full. They tried to keep the troops together. And so they had put her in this tent temporarily. And she got to know the girls. They hung out all day. But towards the end of the day, the counselors came and told her that there was actually room with her troop if she wanted to go back. So she gathered her things and returned to the original tent. In later interviews, she would be quoted saying she will never understand why she was the one that was spared, and it still to this day gives her PTSD because of that. So, like, that strong survivor's guilt. So something that I think, as well as many of the other writers and stuff that I researched while doing this, there was something that should have been disclosed to parents prior to the camp, but wasn't. So there was actually an earlier incident that happened in April of that year. So there, in April of 1977, just 2 months before the murders, there was a training session for the counselors. They were at Camp Scott. They were supposed to be learning how to do everything. However, the weekend ended early because one of the counselors' cabins was ransacked and a disturbing note was discovered in an empty box. So the note said, "We are on a mission to kill 3 girls in Tent 1. Someone had created an effigy of a man and they hung it from a tree by its neck." Now, some say that Tent 1 would technically be the counselors, but if you were looking at it from the end of the camp, technically Tent 1 was the tent that the girls were in, because that would be the first tent you would get to if you came out of the woods. The fact that there's no security of any kind or any kind of like border or anything just blows my mind. But anyway, so they received this note. They sent the counselors home, but then they ended up thinking it was some kind of prank, and so they never told the parents about it. I feel like a lot of people would have kept their children home if they had disclosed this, but anyways, the camp was in the middle of nowhere. Again, no security, no cameras. I mean, it was a Girl Scout camp outdoors. So
In 1977 too, but why was there an effigy of a man?
whoever wrote the note made it and hung it from a tree.
Okay.
They never explained why it was there.
But they wanted to kill 3 girls. Like that
They
was
specifically said,
3
we
girls
want to
in
kill 3
cabin
girls.
one.
And yep.
But that wouldn't. But there's no number on the outside.
Right.
Like it was just like the first one, and then
Yeah, they just said Tent 1, which would technically, if you were coming from the woods,
that's the first one.
If
yeah.
you weren't familiar with the camp, you could easily think that was the first
So
tent.
they thought it was somebody coming in from the woods. Are there any male counselors? Mm-mm. It's all female.
It's all female. But they thought it was just a prank. They thought that someone had just left an awful prank.
This was just months before. Mm-hmm. Okay.
That was in April and the camp was in June.
I hope they're shut down.
Oh, we'll get to that.
Okay.
Anyways, this camp was in the middle of nowhere. Again, no security, no cameras. The information the police have, it was basically pieced together from different witnesses at the camp and then evidence that was later found nearby. So some of this I've already said, but I'm going to kind of go through it again to just kind of give a timeline. So there were 3 girls from another tent that told police that one of the girls needed to go to the bathroom, and so they got up and they were all going to go together, and they were on their way when they saw flashlights. They saw 3 flashlights coming towards them, and they screamed and ran back to their tent when the flashlights disappeared. But they thought it was other Girl Scouts playing tricks on them, because sometimes they would play like jokes on each other. So they didn't really think anything about it. Like they thought that some girls were just trying to scare them. Like another troop was trying to scare them.
And that was by the bathrooms?
It was coming towards them, like through the woods. Like
towards the woods. They were walking to the bathrooms. Okay, and it was something. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, so one of the counselors said that they saw a dim light around the woods surrounding the camp, which was never confirmed if it was the same flashlights as what the 3 girls saw on their way to the bathroom or different ones. She said that no one was supposed to be there, so she got her flashlight and pointed it out towards the trees. She did this, the other light disappeared. She then turned her flashlight off and waited a few moments to see if it would come back, and she turned her flashlight off and waited a while, and the dim light came on but started moving northwest, like away from the camp. So she thought it was nothing, like it was moving away from the camp.
Okay.
So later the same night, as I mentioned earlier, Carla, the counselor, she wakes up to hear a horrible grunting sound. She said it was out of this world. She said it didn't sound human. It didn't sound like any animal she had heard. It was just sounded like something just unworldly. She woke up, the other counselor that was sleeping in the tent with her, but she was so out of it. She was so tired. She said she didn't hear anything. And so she went back to sleep. So Carla, Carla gets up to go investigate this herself. So she turns on the flashlight and the sound just stops. Ew. She does a slow walk around, and everything at the time was very quiet. Nothing was out of place. No, she didn't see anything in the tents or cabins or whatever. Like nothing seemed out of place at that time, so she went to bed. After the bodies are found the next morning and police start investigating and talking to witnesses, the events of the night begin to come together a little bit more. They determine that Lori and Michele were killed inside the tent before being moved, while Denise was carried from the tent and then killed later. Her hands had been bound behind her back with rope and tape. They had all had a sewn gag used on them, like they all had a gag in their mouth. The investigators know that the sleeping bags were left in their position sometime between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. because the sleeping bags were dry, which means they had to have been placed there after that thunderstorm, and that they know that Denise was killed last because, I'm really sorry, but Lori and Michele were already cold in their sleeping bags and rigor mortis had already set in, whereas Denise was still warm when she was found at 6 a.m.
Oh my God.
I just don't understand people that can prey on children. I just don't get it. But anyways, after they were moved, their killer returned to their tent to try and clean the scene using anything he could find.
Really?
To try and wipe up the blood. He stuffed all of these items in the sleeping bags with the girls.
Is it just one person? One?
Again, all three girls had been assaulted. The police were able to recover semen from Michele and Denise. However, they did not take it from Lori, but sparing details, the police said it was obvious that she had also been assaulted. All three girls showed signs of brutal beatings and strangulation.
Why not take it from all of them?
Because she was so young, and I think they just... yeah.
What if there was another one? I don't know. Okay.
I don't know if maybe they just didn't find it on her. They said they didn't test her, but it was obvious that she had been assaulted.
Okay.
So while the police were investigating, okay, but side note, my thing is like, so he had time to kill the girls, go back to the cabin,
right,
and then go back to the things and get away. I don't understand how. I mean, I guess in the middle of the night, he would have been super fast. It would have been dark. Everyone would have been sleeping. But if the last counselor went to check at 3 a.m., and then she found them at 6. That's a 3-hour window. So to me, it's just insane how quickly this happened.
He knew the place.
He had obviously been watching the place.
He'd been watching.
So while the police were investigating, the counselors were moving the other Girl Scouts off the property. They were told that there was something wrong with the camp water and they needed to end camp early. They had no idea that the girls had been murdered, and many of them later stated that they suffered PTSD, knowing what had happened. The parents also were not told. So when the bus
wait. When were they told?
Oh, when the bus arrived back at the headquarters with the girls, the parents were awaiting for them. They were aware that something had happened, but not the full extent. They were just told that there was an accident. Angela said that when she got off the bus, her mother was on her knees just weeping because they were calling the girls off the bus one at one. So parents had no idea. They were just waiting to see if their children came off the bus. So the parents didn't know whose children were injured. So Michelle's parents actually learned about the news of the murder on TV after receiving a call from the camp. Prior to receiving the call from the camp. Lori and Denise's moms also received calls, but none of them were called first, and none of them were informed their children had been murdered. The parents were all told that there was just an accident. The parents would later discover that the first calls the camp made were to their lawyers and their insurance companies.
Shut up. Damn.
Denise's mother would later go on to say she thinks her younger daughter, Kathy, had some sort of intuition of what was to come, and she really wished she had listened to her. Oh. Kathy was only 5 at the time. This is Denise's little sister. And the day they dropped Denise off at the camp, after they had dropped her off, they were driving back, and Kathy starts just asking her mom these questions out of nowhere. She said she wanted to know what happens when people die. And the mom explained that something along the lines of, well, when people die, others are born, and the world just, keeps on going. To which Kathy said, what if everyone dies? And her mom replied that would not happen. And Kathy said, well, tomorrow everyone dies.
Fucking hell. Hold on.
Yeah.
Yikes.
She just thought that maybe her daughter saw something that she shouldn't have. And
this makes me so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. This makes me so uncomfortable.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So during the police's initial search of the 400-acre campsite, they found duct tape, nylon rope, a flashlight, and women's eyeglasses near tent 7. I will explain the eyeglasses. I see your face. They noted that the flashlight had newspaper stuffed inside to keep the batteries from rattling. It also had tape over the lens to dull the light. This person thought this out. The duct tape and rope both matched the kind used on the 3 girls. And further away, the police located a crowbar and several empty beer bottles. As their search expanded, police found more duct tape along with groceries, photographs, and newspapers in a nearby cave. The newspapers were from the same issue found inside the flashlight. And if that wasn't enough evidence that the killer had been living in the cave, the words "the killer were here," or "the killer was here, bye-bye, fools, 77617." I guess June 17th, 1977, but the murders took place on a different day. So I guess he was just living in the cave. But anyways, that was supposedly written on the wall. And I say supposedly because we'll talk about that. Anyways, the nylon rope that was found was traced to a farmhouse near the camp where the farmer insisted that he had been robbed and multiple things had been stolen from him. He did end up passing a lie detector test and he was ruled out as a suspect, but the media published his name and basically made it seem like he did it, and it ruined his life. He had to be committed because he had such a horrible mental breakdown from being accused of this horrible crime that he literally did not commit. They proved he did not commit it. So other than this, though, the police had very little evidence to go on. They did discover that the killer had gone into other tents that night and stolen eyeglasses from the other campers. But they would find these eyeglasses in different places around the campsite, which is just so bizarre. Like, he just took the eyeglasses and then put them other places.
Who was the man? What did he do? He just lived in a cabin? The man that didn't do it, or that they
he was a farmer.
He was a farmer.
He was a farmer. He had a farmhouse. So anyways, what was the point of it? But he seems to have this weird fetish with women's eyeglasses, and I will tell you why. So after the girls were murdered, police suspected 33-year-old Gene Leroy Hart of committing these crimes. He had been sentenced to life in prison years earlier for the kidnapping and sexual assault of 2 pregnant women. One of them who survived and ID'd him. Following his conviction, Hart had escaped from jail and was believed to still be in the area when these murders took place, like the murder of the girls. And so one reason they felt strongly that Gene could have done this is because one of the women who survived his attack that he had gone to prison for said that during her sexual assault, he made these really weird, unworldly noises. He had stolen her eyeglasses. And it was all too similar to what had happened to the girls. Because what are the chances of someone sexually assaulting, stealing the women's eyeglasses and trying them on and stuff? So another reason they felt it could be him is because in the cave was this crumpled picture of a woman. And the police ran a newspaper ad trying to identify the said woman, the woman that was in the picture. And they ended up finding out that the picture had been taken by a local wedding photographer, and that the wedding photographer had gotten the help from a man in prison to develop them. Now, it did not explain why a man in prison was developing the film of a local photographer, okay? So don't ask me, I don't know. But apparently Gene, who was in prison at the time, helped this local photographer develop these wedding photos, and he had one of the photos. Okay, so at this point, they do a man-wide hunt for Gene. And following a 10-month search, a tip led police to a cabin in Cherokee County where Gene was arrested on April 6, 1978. When they captured him, he was wearing women's eyeglasses. The first officer that interviewed him said when he looked Gene dead in the eyes and said, "You did this, didn't you?" Gene only looked at him, and his only response was, "You'll never pin it on me." And that was all he said. So the cabin that Gene was, the cabin that Gene was staying in when he was arrested had evidence allegedly, and I will explain why I say allegedly, but had evidence that matched the campsite that was found near Camp Scott. And the police the police really felt with all of this evidence, it was a done deal. Again, this is case files, though. So Gene was tried for the murders.
You just started, so like...
Gene was tried for the murders of the Girl Scouts in March 1979, but the jury found him not guilty. However, he did return to prison for his original crimes of raping the 2 women where he escaped, and he died of a heart attack on June 4th, 1979 at the age of 35. Gene was a member of the Cherokee Nation and was well respected in his community, even with his crimes, because he was a high school star athlete. Those who attempted to convict Gene believe that the trial should have been taken place outside of Mays County for what they believed would have been a less biased trial. Basically, he was like a small hero in his little community. So, bias aside, there was some issues with evidence once they went to court. There were many people that believed the police planted evidence, which is why I kept saying allegedly. The case came down to a lot about race and culture because Gene was Native American. It turned into such a circus, like the whole case did. And Gene's lawyer reported that Gene had had a vasectomy, meaning that it would have been impossible for him to leave any sperm or DNA on the victims. There were hairs at the scene that experts claimed to have matched Gene, but at this time, to match hairs, all they would do is literally look at them under a microscope. And as of 2015, the FBI has discredited this method as a technique used for court, like for evidence. You can't submit like hair evidence, I guess. And they said it was just too hard to determine if the hair did actually come from someone just by looking at it. So anyways, his defense was basically refuted. The physical evidence saying that they couldn't just say it was hair because it looked similar. Then on the flashlight they had discovered there was a fingerprint on it that they didn't believe was Gene's, and inside the tent was a bloody size 9.5 shoe print where Gene wore a size 11. Experts testified that it would have been very difficult for him to fit into a shoe 9, that it just would have been too hard, and that others say that it's possible someone contaminated the crime scene by stepping into it. And then his attorney also called a jailer who testified that the crumpled photo of the woman that was found in the cave, which is technically the only evidence at the time that tied Gene to this case, that he saw the photos that were crumpled in the sheriff's desk after Gene had escaped from prison, but before they were found in the cave. So he was insinuating that the police, this jailer was claiming that the sheriff took the photo out of his desk, which why would he randomly have this photo of a wedding from a local photographer in his desk? But either way, they say he took the photo, took it out and put it in the cave to make the connection to Gene, which I feel is far-fetched, but whatever. I'm not an investigator. And so then after they discredited that, they say the evidence that was found in the cabin where Gene was arrested was another issue. This cabin was not very big. He had maybe 3 rooms and he was sharing it with a friend. The police searched it the first time when they arrested him, but found no evidence tying him to the crime scene at all. And it wasn't until they did a second search that they found this evidence, which was like a cornstalk pipe thing he was using in a mirror. So the defense brought the owner of the cabin to testify, and he said, listen, they did the search and that stuff was never there. And the second time the stuff just magically appeared there. So was he guilty? Was he not guilty? I guess we'll never know.
But did they do DNA?
Plot twist. Side note. Remember I mentioned he had gone back to prison for the other crimes and he died?
Yeah.
So when he died, they did oh god damn it, I can't say the word. Autopsy. There we go. And it turned out that his vasectomy never took. So it was very possible that he did leave the sperm and the evidence was never planted and he was in fact guilty as fuck.
So DNA.
I'm getting there.
Okay.
Gosh, impatience.
I know.
So although no one was ever officially convicted at this time for the murders of Lori, Denise, and Michele, DNA testing conducted in 2022 strongly pointed at Gene. Although there was no full DNA profile to conclusively say that Jean was the killer. Again, this is from 2018 and 2022. The new testing did rule out several potential suspects that have been considered over the years. The DNA samples had originally been tested in 1989, but they were inconclusive. When they were tested again in 2008, the samples were considered too degraded based on the technology available at that time. So police in Oklahoma, as well as Lori Farmer's mother, Sherry Farmer, were confident that Jean was guilty. Farmer added that the new DNA evidence gave her some peace, but certainly no closure, because again, it wasn't enough to say for certain that it was Jean. So Michelle's father, Richard, helped establish the Victims' Bills of Right in Oklahoma, as well as the Oklahoma Victims' Compensation Board. He said that he felt as though he and his wife were ignored by law enforcement and prosecutors as he drafted the bill to create coordinating centers in Oklahoma to keep victims and families involved in every step of the legal process. The Compensation Board helps provide victims and their family members with money to assist in expenses like medical bills. Lori's mother was, again, her name is Sherry, and she founded the Oklahoma chapter of Parents of Murdered Children, which is an organization dedicated to providing assistance and support of, murdered victims. In 2011, John Russell, who was convicted of embezzlement and check fraud, announced that he was making a movie called Candles, which was a film about... Okay.
That's Alexa telling us to remember to take medicine. Mm-hmm. Hold on.
Okay.
One more time. I know. Okay, go ahead.
I really just think Sock should be the host. He's so perfect right there. Look at him.
I hate this story.
I know. I'm sorry. It's almost done. Like I said, I thought it would be really long, and then I sped through it.
I know. Because it's made me so uncomfortable.
I know. See her. So, so John Russell was convicted of embezzlement and check fraud, and he announced that he was making Candles, a film about the murders at Camp Scott.
The film was called Candles?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Russell decided to make a film about the case because he said that while he was in the Ottawa County Jail in 1979, one of his fellow inmates, Carl Lee Myers, actually confessed to the killings. Myers, who was a convicted murderer, died in prison in 2012 while on death row for the 1996 killing of Cindy Marzano. So before his death, police linked him to the rape and murder of another woman, Sean Williams, but officials never ever connected him to the Girl Scout murders. That's never happened. So John Russell died on November 11th, 2021, and his son is now trying to get Candles produced. The Girl Scouts?
This guy's son, who the filmmaker was saying did it.
Right.
Okay.
So the prisoner who was going to make the film about the other prisoner that confessed to it, those two prisoners died, and now the son of the one I don't understand it. I don't understand why he's trying to make this film happen.
The guilty one or the other one? The son of the guilty one, or
no, the son of the
filmmaker, or the one that
cellmate.
Okay.
So you asked about the camp. The Girl Scouts camp sold the camp, and it had been open since 1928.
Wow.
They sold it to a local family in the 1980s, and the Girl Scout camp remains closed to this day. The site is frequently... Yeah. Sorry, I'm all burpy now.
You are burpy.
It's the cider. So the site is closed to this day, though the site is frequented by ghost hunters and paranormal enthusiasts who claim that the three murder girls haunt the area. So, 2023 updates. The case has been solved. I know it's been a crazy ride. We went back and forth. We thought we'd never know, and that I was done talking, but joke's on you. Sherry had asked Sheriff Reed, who grew up in Mays County, and he was just a boy at the time of the crimes. she asked him to reopen the case. So he was little when this happened, and he remembered seeing it on the news. He remembered hearing about it, and he grew up to be a police officer and made his way up to sheriff. And so he was determined to solve this case. He wanted to know what happened to these girls, who did it. So a year after Reed started looking over the case, he and the OSBI agents went to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in Virginia. And so I learned something new about this, but in the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in Virginia, there are 23 of the best homicide investigators and FBI behavioral analysts and FBI profilers in the entire world that make up a cold case board. And so they work on cold cases. They go through the evidence, they go through theories and whatever. They're the ones trying to solve these cold cases. So I thought that was interesting because I didn't know that there was a board doing this. I thought it was kind of like...
Is it in one state for the whole country, or is it every state has this?
I think it's just at the National Center for the Missing. Like they're at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And so... they made up this cold case board. They were all independently combing through every document, every piece of evidence. They were, going over witness statements, the timeline. They were going across the scene. They were just going through all of it, each one of them. And they all came to the same conclusion that the only possible answer to the person that committed these crimes was Jean Hart. So...
Take that, Jean.
I think all of these people working together and coming to a conclusion was really one of those moments for us that those people who don't live in Oklahoma, don't have any thought about who it should be, arrived at the same conclusion that we already had known, said Sherry Farmer. Sherry Farmer finally let herself believe that they would get to the truth when agents suggested to Reed and the OSBI to have the evidence retested for DNA. So... because the technology had come so far since 1977, they said, let's retest it. Unfortunately, to retest it, it was going to cost $30,000. And the sheriff's department said, we don't have that. We can't do that. However, they put out a public announcement to the citizens of Mays County. And the citizens of Mays County stepped up and raised every single penny of that $30,000. And that evidence was tested in 2019. And while the results have never been released, they were never released publicly until very recently. Every person that was looked at as a suspect, there is not a piece of DNA that we have not been able to identify. He said, all of the DNA from the scene, all of it, matched the 3 girls and Jean Hart only.
Get out. Cut.
So while he was acquitted, and then he died while never, ever facing justice for those 3 girls, it was determined that it was his DNA, and he 1,000% committed that crime. And Reed had basically said, he was determined to solve it, and he was happy for the families to get some kind of closure, to know that Jean was the one that did it. But he said that even with all the crazy theories that people had, there was a lot of people that said, oh, there was multiple people, or the evidence was planted, or this and that. And Reed said there was so much that he could explain everything. They could explain everything. And so the final quote I'll say here is, if there was absolutely no DNA whatsoever, just the information that I now know, that was not allowed to be shown to the jury, there's absolutely no doubt whatsoever that Jean Hart is the person who committed these crimes. So there was so much that the jury was never presented with, or that hasn't been made public.
Because it wasn't admissible, or...
Wasn't admissible. Oh. The defense ruled it out, got it ruled out. Oh. For one reason or another, they claimed it was not good enough, but there was a lot of it that was never made public, and some of it's still not made public. But he said it was so obvious that Jean, and that they should have tested him while he was alive. the vasectomy thing, all of that, and they never did. And so it wasn't until 2023 that they determined it. But so the case has been closed, and there's a documentary again that you can watch on YouTube called "Someone Cry for the Children." It's a really, really, really good documentary. It has talks about the girls, and it really honors them, and it talks to the families and some of the people, and goes really into the case, because there's a lot that I had to kind of skip over just for the sake of time, and some stuff I just didn't want to talk about. And there's so many good articles. The one that I was talking about, the very in-depth news article, the one that talks about the updates and talks about how they solved the case and everything, is from, it's called News 9. Anyways, it's the last link on the resources, and I will highlight it for you guys. And then again, Crime Junkie, it was called Murdered Oklahoma Girl Scouts. Like, their episode was really good, but it was in 2018, so they don't have the updated information of the stuff that happened in 2019, 2022, and 2023. But
wow. So was Gene Hart, was he married? Did he have family? Like, does he have children? Did they, this documentary, was there, I mean, did they like eat crow? I don't know. He's dead, but are they being shown that evidence? I don't know. It's not their fault he did it, but I'm just saying, like,
Yeah. I don't think he had family. He was from Cherokee Indian descent. He was, again, like I said, that small town hero. He was the talented football player. He was
probably at least had a wife then.
He was raised like he was raised by his mother. I do know he didn't really talk to his father at all. Like, he didn't really have a relationship there. He was known to be a criminal, like a career criminal, rapist, assisted murder. Like I said, when he got arrested, so he was originally arrested in 1966 because he kidnapped 2 young pregnant women from a parking lot and drove them to Mace County, which is where he sexually assaulted them. And it was because of that woman talking about him taking her glasses that kind of tied him to the Girl Scout stuff, because, he took their glasses. But I don't think he was married or had children, as far as my knowledge goes. I didn't see anything talking about him. I just saw most things talking about his criminal history, because it was such a long list of crimes.
I'm glad he's dead, but I wish he had seen some justice. That's for sure.
Yeah. So.
Well, shit. Actually,
I'm sorry.
That was fucked up.
I know.
Those poor little girls.
Well, and that's why, I mean, honestly, when I saw the story, that's kind of why I wanted to talk to him, because I don't think it's a well-known story, and I think that, that's such a sad thing, and their mothers feel so much guilt for sending them, and the other Girl Scouts have that survivor's guilt, and I think it's just important to talk about them, because they were so young, and it's sad. I don't want them to be forgotten.
I feel bad for those moms, because I can only imagine. But that, it's like, makes you want to be a helicopter parent.
Well, Denise's mom especially, she felt so guilty, because she's, Denise said she didn't want to go. She tried to back out, and then she made her stay anyways. And then Lori's mom just felt awful, because she's the one that chose the Girl Scout camp, where she could have sent her to the Y, and she didn't really have a reason for sending her to the Girl Scout camp. She just kind of thought it would be, a little more
girls.
Yeah, for
girls. It's safer.
Yeah. So yeah. And I should mention that another reason that I was surprised they acquitted Gene, I guess it's not really surprising. He only grew up less than a mile away from the camp. He was very familiar with the area.
Oh yeah.
And so, I honestly cannot believe he was acquitted, but Yeah, I don't think he was ever married. I don't think he had any children. Yeah.
Well, may he rot in hell.
Yes. I surely hope that's where he is.
Burning on fire. All right.
Sorry.
Well, okay. So on that note, y'all,
I'm so sorry. There is another documentary on Hulu.
Go.
I forgot to mention this
there
one.
is.
It's The Keeper of the Ashes.
Okay.
And it's on Hulu, and it's really good as well. Keeper of the Ashes, the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders.
Okay.
It
Awesome.
will be in the notes.
Ooh-wee. So I don't know how I'm supposed to follow that one.
I'm sorry.
All right, everybody. We do have spring break here next week. So, but we'll still be here, and yeah. So if you're on spring break next week, I don't really know what to say. I'm fucked up right now.
At me. I'm sorry, but I saw it and I had to do it because I felt so bad for these girls and their parents.
That brought me so much anxiety. I'm like, I am never sending my children anywhere. They are going to be in my sight. But I know that's not true. I'm going to have to let them fly free. Anyway, we'll see. Yeah. We'll see you next week. We'll see you next week.
I love you guys. Bye.
All right. We'll see you next week. If you see something, say something.
Listen to your children. Listen to your gut. Bye.
Bye. This is not appropriate.